What's going on, everybody? My name is Tenebris Infinite, and welcome back to Generation Zero. Today we are going to be talking about the Engineer Specialization. So, the Engineer Specialization is the best specialization in the game, bar none. As an engineer, you have access to scavenging more ammunition and more resources from the robots you kill, and also you get the opportunity to turn one of the enemy robots against them and utilize it for your own purpose in combat. So the robot you get to take advantage of is the Tick. So this is the Tick, and he is pretty much the ultimate kamikaze warrior. This dude is designed to just be popped out really quickly, seek out any opponent that you have, and then blow himself up against him. So before we start getting into the skills and the weapons that I've picked for my character here, let's talk about how I personally use my ticks. Most of the time, I will be using my ticks as a kind of deterrent to my enemies. I'll be using them in place of things like flares and fireworks and radios. When enemies are starting to overwhelm me, usually I'll drop out a small group of these guys, and they'll start knocking the enemies all around and giving me tons of opportunities to either shoot off their weapons or just go for the kill on whatever it is I'm fighting. So these little dudes are very much a multi-purpose tool when you wind up getting them. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of being an engineer here. So, as an engineer, as I said, you have the opportunity to scavenge much more resources from the robots than you would normally. So that means that actively being in combat can sometimes be a better payoff being an engineer than going off and farming resources from houses or buildings or anything like that. But the con that kind of weighs against the engineer is that you wind up with a little bit of a glass cannon build. You can sometimes wind up with a character that is pretty weak to oncoming attacks, so you'll have to balance your character around that. I've kind of laid out my own skill points to kind of mitigate that sort of stuff, so let's talk about how I've allocated my skill points here. So the initial skill that you get when you're going down the engineer skill line is the chemist skill. And this can be a lot of times what would lead you away from going down this skill tree, as the chemist skill is pretty worthless. Increasing your gas resistance by 10% does pretty much nothing. In the end, it changes like 5 damage down to 4 damage or something like that. And then when you wear a gas mask, it goes down to 1. But in reality, gas doesn't wind up being the thing that's gonna kill you in this game anyway. But the next skill after the chemist skill is super useful. The lockpicking skill. I'm gonna praise this skill till the end. Lockpicking is so useful. Having the opportunity to get into the military buildings at will, just whenever you're out and about, having the ability to get into the little white locked little freezer looking rooms that have weapons in them, being able to get into the red box rooms that have grenades and med kits in them is so useful. So the lockpicking skill is incredibly useful in this game, and having the lockpicking skill just unlocks a whole bunch of opportunities for you. So the big thing, though, that made me look at the engineer skill tree as being the absolute bee's knees of all of these skill trees is that the salvage skill is easily the best skill in the game. Getting a 100% ammo increase from any loot container that you go into is blessed. It's automatically the best thing that you can have happen in a game that's designed like Generation Zero. And then after the salvage skill, there is the mechanic. And with the mechanic, you are able to salvage more damaged components from robots, which means that you're able to get more attachments for your guns, or more tech pods, say, or at least it used to be like that. Um, and so the mechanic ability is, again, just incredibly useful. When you have an engineer, you're able to benefit all of your other characters or all of your friends in multiplayer uh, much more than if you were not unlocking these skills. And then afterwards, one of my biggest regrets in Generation Zero is that I did not max out my explosives expert. So if you are building an engineer, I think it's a really good idea to max out your explosives expertise so that way your explosions from your tech pods are able to do a larger area of damage to your opponents. I do hope that someday there will be a respec option added in this game so that way I will be able to allocate my skill points a little bit more efficiently. But then for the last one, the big old specialization engineer, which means that you are able to pick up the tick pods, which I've already outlined. Now, the way I kind of fixed my character's flimsiness is maybe different to how you might want to fix your character's glass cannon effect as you play as an engineer. But for me, what I chose was running speed, and I chose for my character to just be a really fast character that kind of dodges most of the combat as opposed to trying to take it head on, and uses mobility above just plain old firepower or just like standing there and gunning an enemy down. But when it does come to gunplay, I've managed to put a couple skill points into a handful of the actual combat perks because all of these are incredibly useful for your character, especially in solo play. Alright, so now that we've talked about the ticks and we've talked about the skills, let's talk about some of the weapons that I've decided for my dude here. So, some of the weapons that I'm going with for my engineer build are pretty much just really high-powered weapons, and also I'm kind of made it a bit of a goal to make most of my weapons be weapons that you could obtain in-game without having to do very much farming. So I've decided that I would go with the Magnus for its opportunity to make really quick one-shot kills. The Grantigavar for a really quick EMP pulse round that I can use against large enemies. For sniping, I use the 50 cal just because it's really strong and pretty reliable at a distance, and my character is not designed around any sort of stealth, so the lack of a silencer for the 50 cal does not really hurt my character. Then I use the, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but the Ciock semi-auto shotgun, and I use this one because the Sockfist is really, like, stable when you fire it, so it's really reliable for buckshot rounds and utilizing the buckshot rounds. And I find that the 12 gauge pump is more reliable for things like slug rounds and potentially putting a silencer on it, and again having a more stealthy build than what my engineer is. And then for the assault rifle, for the last weapon here, I go for the AI-76 because, again, it's easy to obtain for all of you guys out there, and also it is a very reliable assault rifle, being the only AK-type assault rifle in the game. It has 3 types of fire, so the burst fire is really reliable for quickly taking down weak enemies. The surplus of ammo makes it a reliable weapon for taking down hunters, and the general punch of the armor-piercing bullets makes it reliable as well for taking down large enemies like tanks and harvesters. So there we go, the engineer specialization. I gave you guys a little bit of the pros and the cons, some gameplay, talked about how I utilize the character best, and yeah, hopefully this is helpful to you guys if you're starting a new character, or if you're in the process of making a character right now and you maybe want to go for something a little bit different than what you've been doing already. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you all enjoyed, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Until then, peace.